Okay. I'm going to be giving a little talk about Amarok too, but I have two disclaimers. First of all, I've been asked to talk nice and loud, but I've been at this expo for 2 days and shouting my voice out, so I'm a little bit rusty. Also, I'm not going to be giving a big technical talk about Amarok 2, and I'm not going to be having a live demo, but if you want a live demo of Amarok 2, you can come to our booth, which is 20 meters that way. What I am going to be talking about a bit is how I think in Amarok 2 we're seeing an interesting interaction between free software and free culture, which is also why this talk is titled The Intersection of Free Software and Free Culture. And in this talk I'll try to cover something about these ideas of freedom. How do they apply to software? How do they apply to culture? And I'm sure many of you know this, but we're going to go through it quickly anyway. I'm going to be talking a little about what common ground there is between free software and free culture and open music. And based on this common ground, how do we bring these things together? And then of course this is an Amarok talk, so I'm going to present Amarok, the past, the present and the future. And I'm going to be taking questions. And unfortunately, as I said, no demos, but I do have a few nice screenshots put in instead, and we're giving demos in our booth just down the hall. So, first of all, how do I fit in all this? Well, I started out by writing the integrated Magnitude music store in Amarok 1.4.4. And with Amarok 2 I've become a co-author, and I've been focusing on integrating different kind of online services, online content, into Amarok. And as of September 2007, I've become an independent software developer, and I work freelance for Magnitude.com, which is the record label I integrated into Magnitude. And since they make a significant percentage of their music sales through Amarok, they also allow me to spend quite a bit of my time actually hacking on Amarok, which is good for Amarok and in the long term hopefully good for Magnitude as well. So that's one of the examples. Well, I'm pretty sure you all know this guy. I got longer hair than him now. Okay, cool. Richard M. Stallman founded the Free Software Foundation and came up with much of what we consider the definition of free software today. And he's the original author of the GPL. And I'm not going to get into any flame wars about whether GPL is the correct free and open source license, but it's the one I'm most familiar with, and to some extent is the one that fits into this context the best. Then there's this guy, Lawrence Lessig, who founded the Creative Commons movement and came up with the definition of free culture. And Larry Lessig, by doing this, he was actually drawing on a lot of experience he had by sitting in the board of the Free Software Foundation. So it's not really a coincidence that these two phenomena have so much in common. So the Creative Commons is by and large inspired by the free software and the GPL in particular. Although lately some licenses more than others, Creative Commons now spans a whole range of licenses. Some are very close to complete copyright, all rights reserved, and some are very close to public domain. So they try to span a whole range of licenses. The one I'm most familiar with, and the one all the services that I work with currently use, is the non-commercial attribution share-alike license, which is basically a GPL type license, copyleft license with a non-commercial clause. And it's generally accepted that this non-commercial clause, even though it would go against the definition of free software, most people consider it fair when you're talking about music, because the only real way to make some sort of money off music is that if you limit commercial use to people who actually buy some kind of license. But that is a discussion. So both of these types of licenses ensures the users or consumers certain rights with this content, rights that they wouldn't have with a complete all rights reserved copyright. And in my opinion at least, the companies and services who actually employ these licenses, they exist in a spirit of collaboration and friendly competition. Meaning that even though they're competitors, it's not the game's not quite as dirty as it is in the regular software world with patents and lawsuits and whatnot. That might just be a be because these services and companies are not that big yet, or it might be an intrinsic value of these licenses. That remains to be seen, I guess. So, services offering music under these free licenses or open licenses and projects doing free software, how can they cooperate? Well, the first one that comes to mind is mutual promotion, and the project Amarok that I'm a part of is actually a good example of that. Way back in the days, before I even started working on Amarok, they did a live CD. Basically a bootable CD with Amarok on it and a bunch of music. And this music was incidentally provided by Magnatune, who allowed the developers to choose their favorite tracks and distribute them for free. This of course caused people to learn about Magnatune. It was written loud and clearly in the live CD that this music is from Magnatune. Amarok had some music they could distribute without fear of copyrights or being broken and lawsuits being filed. So this allowed both projects, both Amarok and Magnatune, to reach new audience and new users. Further down the road you can say, well, this combination might allow you to provide an alternative to stuff like iTunes and these very heavily integrated and very proprietary software music solutions. And as I kind of become an example on, well, doing this and providing values to some of these companies can actually get you funding for your free software project. Even though I spent most of my working time on the Magnatune side and their projects, I actually do spend a significant amount of time paid on Amarok as well. The last 3 weeks, for instance, I've been working pretty much full-time on Amarok too, which, well, there are a lot of people working on it, but 3 weeks full-time does really push development forward somewhat. Yeah? There we go. So, this is how it all started out. This is Amarok 1.4 point something with the integrated Magnatune store. This was made possible by Magnatune already realizing the value of having their content integrated into other sites, other applications. They've made available an XML feed, which I'm not sure it's the ultimate way of doing this, but at least it allows other people to download this XML file, which is a complete index of all their music, genres and stuff like that, and it has URLs where you can stream each track and where you can go to buy each track. So this I picked up and I tried to integrate that into Amarok, sorry. And technically the implementation was very much a graft, meaning it fetched on or latched on to Amarok, but it was never really part of Amarok. And you can also see that if you start streaming a Magnatune stream in Amarok 1.4.x, the on-screen display will display a long string of track name, preview, blah blah blah, that's fetched directly from the streaming servers. So it doesn't really integrate technically that well, but it works. And it was reasonably successful. And what does reasonably successful mean? Well, generally we got very positive feedback from this. People liked it. Some people didn't care, obviously. There are no Madonna and no Britney Spears on there, so for some people that rules out any value. It also meant that in this process I got in contact with Magnatune and I convinced them to implement an open API for purchasing. As I said, originally we had this XML file which allowed you to stream their music and go to the website and purchase it. I was a bit more ambitious than that, and I said, well, let's why not do purchasing integrated from within Amarok, so you get this one app experience. You go, you listen, you purchase, it gets added to your local collection, and you play it. Which is, in my mind, more valuable than having to go through a web browser. It turns out that we actually drive a significant amount of sales to Amarok. A significant percentage of their album downloads and album purchases comes directly through Amarok, which is significant because their users span Linux, Windows, Mac, especially Windows, since they do have the largest market share, but our percentage is way higher than that distribution would indicate. So it does actually seem to add some value that you can do this, listen to it and buy it from within your favorite music manager. Also, this work, even though it was a graft, it did lay the technical foundations, or at least prototyping some of the stuff that I'll talk about a little later in Amarok 2. And it caused other applications to realize that this info was there and available, and to use the XML file and the purchasing API. And actually, Rhythmbox, the GNOME music manager player, they came out with support for this about, was it a month and a half, 2 months after Amarok did. So they picked up on this really quickly, which is positive because it's promoting free software, it's spreading this free content around. So even though they technically are competitors at Amarok, I think that's fine. It shows the value of opening up your APIs to third parties. Now, for Amarok 2, we have quite an ambitious program. Amarok 2 is in large part a rewrite of Amarok. We discussed this, I think, earlier today, and we agreed that at least 50% of the code has been or is being completely rewritten, which is a lot because Amarok is a fairly large code base. But doing this rewrite also allows for much better integration of some of this stuff. We had a chance to sit down and say, well, the ideas behind Amarok 1 worked for the original concept. Now our concept has somewhat expanded. How do we make this more sane? How do we make this nicer to work with? And we have a developer, Maximilian, who came up with a brilliant concept of a collection framework and meter framework, which basically rips out the entire core of Amarok 1. How do you handle tracks and collections? And replaced it with something new that allows for much greater flexibility. And on top of this, we could build a service framework which supports services, because it turned out most of these services, they actually fit the bill for being a collection quite nicely. I think I'll show you that as well. On top of this, we need services, and we need lots of them. So you're getting services, you're getting lots of them. This also makes it easy for new people to add services. I've added a number of them, and I doubt we'll add more for 2.0 since we are basically starting to go into release mode. But in the long run, I hope it makes it easy for people to come up with a good idea that I would never have thought of and adding it. And of course, we have in Amarok 2 tons of other cool stuff, and I'll show you some screenshots, and you're more than welcome to come to our booth and have a look for this. If you haven't already, I recognize quite a few of you. So what kind of services do we have? And now the age of this slide actually starts to show. Well, first up, we do have Jamendo and Magnitude, which are both services based on this concept of free culture or open music. Magnitude, I talked a bit about it. It's friendly record label, tries to treat musicians and customers fairly, both, and do so in a way of openness that you get to purchase things, you get to choose what you pay. You get to pass it around to your friends if you like, as long as it's non-commercial use. And Jamendo, which is basically a site where upcoming musicians or unsigned musicians can upload their own stuff, show it to the world, have people download it, distribute it. So it's, hear me, here I am, a showcase site. Turned out that there was a lot of other sites that offered integrated or interesting possibilities. MP3 Tools is a commercial company that offers an online locker, basically, where you can upload your own music with password protected and stream it from everywhere you want. It's not a sharing site, it's closed space, so you can only access it with your password. We already had Shoutcast in Amarok 1.4, but it was integrated in kind of a crude way, so that deserved its own service as well. The Apache project, I don't know how many of you know it. It's an open source free software PHP-based streaming service that you access via your web browser. So you set up a service with all your music and you can stream that from anywhere. They've added a new API that allows third-party programs to actually access this. So this is integrated really well into Amarok as well. And as I promised, more to come, and more has actually already come. We now also have a nice Last.fm service. We also had Last.fm support in the old version, but Last.fm is significantly more advanced than this one. We also have a podcast directory now, where instead of having to go to the web and find your podcast, take the URL, paste it into Amarok, you actually now have a nice searchable list of podcasts that you can browse through and get information about and subscribe to from within Amarok. And my own personal favorite, which unfortunately is not going to be in 2.0, is the scriptable service. Something I wrote a prototype of a long time ago, but getting it just right is tricky, it seems. How about adding the ability to allow people to add services using scripts, so they don't have to open up Amarok, no C++ Qt code, but a nice little Ruby script that will add the service populated with content and dynamically retrieve content as the service asks for it. We've had in Amarok great success with these scripts in the 1.x series, where people have added all kinds of functionality that we never would have dreamt of. Why not see if the same could be possible with services? Also, this will allow people to add services whose appeal are not wide enough that really calls for inclusion into Amarok. Say I like Danish underground dance music. That's not something I can likely justify that I add a service into the code base of Amarok, because the audience is likely very small, but add a small script, distribute that to the people who might find this interesting. So that adds value to Amarok without really giving people who don't care a lot of things they don't need. So this is the part where I would normally give a nice live demo, but I don't have time for that, and this is not my laptop. So this is a few weeks old, though a week old screenshot of Amarok 2. Basically looks like this today, except the volume slider has been modified slightly. Out here on the left, we have the list of services that are integrated currently. You can turn these off and off in the configuration. They're all completely plug-in based, so if you don't care about any of them, you turn them off. They won't get loaded, they won't take up CPU time or memory. And there's actually almost no code in Amarok that's specifically hard-coded to any of these services. So if any of these services disappears from the surface of the Earth, well, by disabling the plugin, you actually make sure that there's no overhead in Amarok at all from having that at some point. We have in the center the new context view, which is based on the KDE4 Plasma technology, which allows us to add dynamic content. And this is actually one of the main design concepts behind Amarok, that the stuff that was in the old context browser, if you know Amarok 1.4.x, was kind of hidden away. We really wanted to bring that to the forefront, as that was some of the stuff that made Amarok really unique among music players. We have over here the new playlist, and that was actually, doing a new playlist was actually spurred on by us wanting to have this big central area, because if you wanted that big central area, the old column-based playlist didn't work, because to have any real value it needed to be quite wide. We need to shrink that down into size quite dramatically. So we came up with this idea of a columnless playlist. And so far it actually works really, really well. It helped a lot that it actually gained the ability to group albums together whenever possible. That made it a lot shorter. But we still maintain the ability to use something of a classic playlist view if somebody finishes it for 2.0. So people who complain hard enough, they can go hack on that, and I don't want to hear any complaints anymore. Now, some guys actually started working on that really hard, so it seems we will be offering this, and we'll be offering an alternative view. And one of the beauties of doing this with Qt 4 is that everything is model view based. So we have a model behind this playlist, and doing a new view for it is actually extremely simple. So it might actually end up that we have several different views you can switch between. Right now there are just 2 planned. And I think I have another screenshot. Yeah. This is Amarok 2 browsing stuff from magnatune.com, showing the artist information in the big QWebKit-driven Plasma applet, while playing a Last.fm stream. Actually, you can tell it's playing a Last.fm stream by the small toolbar down there. It says track artist album from Last.fm, and it also has this little Last.fm icon or emblem on the screenshots. So that's a part of the new Last.fm integration, which goes out automatically, fetches album covers, artist information, all that stuff. So this kind of thing is also a whole lot more well integrated into Amarok than it ever was. This also shows you how a single track looks like. You might also notice when you're playing a Last.fm track, you do have a few additional options, because there are things you can do with a Last.fm track. You have these love, ban, and skip options that are not available with a normal track. They actually get added throughout Amarok. You can notice, you can see them in the small sub-toolbar next to the play controls. They come and go as needed, as any track can add unique controls there. So if we add another service one time where you can do something interesting with some of the tracks, well, the frameworks allows them to put their own personal actions up there. And again, this is something that's not hard-coded into Amarok in any way. So there's no check if this is Last.fm, go add this stuff. It's simply added to the service-specific implementation of the tracks. I think that's really nice. And these actions are actually also added if you right-click on the playing track in the playlist, or, and that's not shown here, if you right-click on the Amarok's tray icon. So whenever there's something special you can do with the now currently playing track, that gets added throughout Amarok. And of course I mentioned that the new the root info applet is driven by QWebKit, which is integrated into Qt 4.4, which is basically Apple's WebKit component, open source thingy. So it's a full web browser, and it actually runs really well and renders really fast. So we try to change the rules a bit. You know the saying that if you can't beat people at their own game, then see if you can't change the rules a bit. So Amarok 2 provides a vendor-neutral ecosystem where everyone can participate. This is my idea of doing something completely opposite of what iTunes is doing. In iTunes you have a proprietary program, you have a locked-down music store with only one participant. And if you want to participate, you do it on their rules, on their terms. With Amarok 2 we have a free software system. We have a framework that allows everyone who has an API they can access to actually add a service to stream, buy, browse, whatever content it is they have. We have no hardware, software or format login, no DRM, we only support this player, no fake restrictions that are only there to annoy people. And I think this gives us a common base with great potential for diversity, but how this pans out will remain to be seen. We have some cool ideas already, but this is post 2.0 stuff. So some future ideas, some of these ideas. Well, how about an open API for accessing music? Right now we have a framework where people can build a service against any API they can imagine. But this actually requires that you build a new service every time you want to integrate a new online music source. How about making an API that's generic, meaning that I have a site, I have some sort of content I want to distribute, so I set out this API. Think of it a bit like RSS feeds. Instead of having to write a new service, you simply enter the address of their whatever base string or XML config file, and the API takes care of the rest. You automatically get a service that understands this format. So you don't have to write a service, you actually just have to enter the base. This will work at least for basic things like streaming, previewing, fetching covers and stuff. Purchasing and such things might be added separately, or might have to be added on the side, but still, this is a great base, and this would eliminate a whole lot of redundant code, because right now some of the services use APIs that are almost similar but not quite, so it does require a completely new code base for each. I'm thinking a bit about basing this on the Apache API. The Apache project and Amarok, we worked together on the new API, and the Amarok service was actually created simultaneously with the API, so we were testing each other a bit. And as I said, it was make connecting to new services as easy as entering a URL. And I'm kind of wondering still if this was a worthwhile Google Summer of Code project, because unfortunately not something I have time to really dig into right now. And more services, well, duh. So that was the scripted material for now. So questions? Please?
Yeah, just would like to ask, is the UI skinnable? Because My girlfriend will never gonna use that. It looks too technical.
No, the UI is not officially skinnable. I have to be careful what I say now. The UI is basically primarily on SVG graphics. Mm-hmm. And while we're not officially supporting skinning, there's nothing stopping you from actually going into the install directory and changing all the SVGs. But we've talked a lot about this, and some of the results we've had with earlier versions of Amarok, with skinning parts of Amarok, has not really been pretty, to say the least. What Amarok will do, however, automatically is that if you run a different color theme, it will actually automatically tint or color the SVGs to match, meaning that an Amarok on a dark color scheme will actually look dramatically different than Amarok on a light one. I have some pictures of that on my blog, among other things. And that's actually quite a radical change you get in the look of Amarok without actually changing anything at all within Amarok. So it's sort of a hidden configuration option. There is no configuration option, but you still actually can change the look of Amarok quite dramatically. So I think that'll have to be my answer for now.
Other questions? How good is Amarok working with the GNOME desktop? If it's with the GNOME desktop, so because
no, the GNOME desktop widgets,
because I think Amarok is more depending on the KDE desktop, isn't it?
Yeah, Amarok is based on the KDE libs, meaning that Amarok will require KDE libs, and it will also require the KDE-based runtime libraries to be installed. And as I said, the main view here in the center uses Plasma, which is a pure KDE technology. But it does not require you to run a KDE desktop to work. It will run just fine on GNOME, and it actually will run just fine on Windows, and it will run just fine on Mac as well. So it's based on, but not tied very hard to KDE. Even though, and that said, in the future it might give you some compound benefits running KDE. For instance, since these things are pure Plasma applets, while it's not possible right now, it might be possible that if you're running a Plasma desktop, such as KDE4, dragging stuff from Amarok. So there's, for instance, this little now playing thing, put that on the desktop and minimize Amarok. That might work. Also, with KDE4 you have this, one of the future plans is this media center overlay for Plasma. And we had a lot of people do full-screen interfaces for Amarok. Well, doing a full-screen interface in Plasma on this would make a lot of sense, I think, as that'll be very well integrated into KDE. You can use the Amarok data sources and just place widgets that match a full-screen theme on top of this. So. Did that answer your question at all? Or? Okay. Anyone else? Oh, there.
So you told us how to download somehow another type of music, so alternative music. But my problem is not how to find it, how to download it, but how to find alternative music that I like. Is there something in there which will help me?
That is an issue, and that's an issue with a lot of these services actually. How do you discover new music? And Amarok 2 in its current form does not really have the one true solution to that. We have Last.fm, which is sort of a stream it'll give you suggestions to things that you like, and you can actually a new feature that was added last week. In your own collection, you can right-click on any artist and say, play me similar stuff from Last.fm. So that will work. On the other hand, I am employed by Magnitude, and I do know they have an interface, at least partly working, for typing in Madonna and getting stuff from them that's sort of similar. Yeah, Madonna or whatever you like. Hey. What is it?
I don't like her.
No, but whatever you do like, your girlfriend might. Okay, your little sister then, whatever. It was just an example for crying out loud. But anyway, they do have sort of an interface for this, and this is something that might be worth integrating into Amarok later. So when you're searching, the search bar that's actually in the services, I don't know, could we see that in the next, yeah, at the top here. Right now that'll just allow you to filter the stuff that's there. But it might actually be possible to allow you to filter for stuff that's not there, meaning that if I'm a big fan of Porcupine Tree, for instance, that if I write Porcupine Tree, it's not going to search well, it will search for porcupine tree, it won't find any, and will then go say, okay, what do we have that's similar in style to this? So that might be one approach, but again, it's not something we really put a lot of work into yet. But I acknowledge that it's an issue that needs to be solved.
But with Last.fm, we can do the similar artist stuff. And so we actually got a Last.fm service too. Last.fm is a company based in London, and they're doing music services. And we also got the third service from the top is Last.fm. And you can just type in any artist you like Madonna or whatever, and it will actually play Madonna, or it will play Porcupine Tree, or similar artists to that. But it's actually possible. Not with Magnitude, but with Last.fm it's possible. So it's really easy to do.
That is true, but I think the question was also, how do I discover artists that are in these services that are similar to Porcupine Tree? And Last.fm will give you mainstream artists that are not in these services, so it gives you part of the solution, but that doesn't go all the way, I think.
Okay, probably last question. We'll run out of time, slowly but steadily. No? Okay.
I got off cheap then.
So I would like to thank Nikolaj for this introduction to Amarok too.